it came across in such a way that you kind of sensed what he was feeling. But the facts that he was spewing, the substantive stuff that came oozing out of his mouth, it was straight down the line. There were no chances with the editorializing. And that's what made it interesting. The first person that really gave me the idea of being able to editorialize and opine was Howard Cosell. That was the first person that I saw, that I looked at, which is why I loved him so much, because that was the first person that I saw on TV and said, I believe him, no matter what he says, because he made himself come across as very believable about whatever it was he felt. You could challenge it, you can question it, you can object to it, but what you couldn't do was look at him and say, he doesn't mean what he says, because you always knew he meant what he said.
So when did you go from the level of curiosity, where you're asking because you're curious, to now having an opinion about things?
Well, I would tell you that didn't come till very later on in my life as my career evolved. Excuse me. If you remember, I started off as a newspaper writer. I was a writer for the school newspaper, disc jockey for the school newspaper, and stuff like that. And I grew up in an age before social media, before the blogosphere and what have you. And so as a result, you were taught that you had to work your way up to the point where you had a license to editorialize and give commentary. Before you were a general sports columnist, you were a columnist covering one of the leagues. Prior to that, you were a beat writer or a features writer or an investigative writer and reporter. One of, if not all of those different positions, before you were given a license to editorialize and express yourself. And so the objective and the goal all along from day one was to ultimately elevate yourself to being a general sports columnist. And so I started off as an intern, and then I became a high school writer for the New York Daily News after interning at the Winston-Salem Journal, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Greensboro News and Record. My job title was an editorial assistant. I did calendar items and school lunch menus and things of that nature from 8:30 a.m. to 6 at night.
Wow.
And then from 7 p.m. to midnight, I covered high school sports, high school football in the Piedmont Triad area for the Greensboro News and Record for free. I did that on my own time. The goal was to always accumulate published clips, because I knew, coming from an historically black college like Winston-Salem State, if I was going against people from Columbia to the University of Missouri or Northwestern, the UCLA or whatever, and it was their school against my school, my credibility would be challenged, because my degree was in mass communications and it wasn't known for journalism per se as an institution, as an HBCU, while those schools were renowned for having journalism programs. And so I knew that I had to accumulate practical experience, published clips or whatever, because if I did that, then I could walk into an office and sell my work to a potential employer. Not because my work was better or more gifted than the other people, even though in some cases it was, in some cases it wasn't. But it was also me displaying my level of tenacity and my commitment to being in that profession. Because I knew and imagined that an employer, if he's looking at somebody that has a laissez-faire attitude per se towards being in that industry and doesn't necessarily want it, I know every employer wants someone who wants it. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. If you are in a position where you hire somebody, the number one trait that you want to see outside of their obvious ability is the want it factor.